This happened a few months ago. I had just turned 34 and left the city behind. I wanted to trace my Appalachian roots and find stories for my writing. A small town in Pennsylvania seemed perfect. Old wooden houses and winding gravel roads made it look charming, but I felt like something was off, especially as Thanksgiving approached. One cold afternoon, I sat in a dimly lit room with Mrs. Gentry, an elderly resident. She spoke slowly, recalling a Thanksgiving dinner from her youth. I focused on her words, intrigued, but also skeptical. It ended with a neighbor going missing. I figured it was folklore, just a good story for winter nights. But I kept thinking about her story. I began asking locals about strange happenings tied to Thanksgiving. They shared eerie tales, families that vanished overnight, shadowy figures lurking at the edge of the woods, whispered rituals that felt too odd to be true. I wrote down everything. I didn't believe every word, but my curiosity grew, pulling me deeper into this town's history. As I dug further, the air thickened around me. I wasn't sure if it was just me, but it felt like someone was watching. I walked through the streets, leaves rustling underfoot, skin crawling for no reason. My heart raced at sudden noises, like low whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Maybe I should have stopped. One evening, while walking home, I noticed a figure under a street lamp. I froze. It was just a silhouette, unmoving, but something felt wrong. I called out, asking if they needed help. Silence hung in the air. I glanced down the street looking for someone else, something to break the tension. When I looked back, the figure was gone. Cold dread washed over me. The feeling of being watched wouldn't leave. I asked Mrs. Gentry again about the neighbor who vanished. She hesitated, her eyes darting away. Some found their way back, but others never did. That unsettled me. Were those stories real? I didn't know anymore. Thanksgiving was approaching fast. I went to a small gathering at the town hall. Everyone chatted, but I felt strange. The townsfolk glanced at me, their smiles a bit too wide, eyes flickering with discomfort. I was an outsider. Maybe they sensed it too. Suddenly I heard a crash outside. I rushed to the window, heart pounding. In the dark, I thought I saw something moving in the woods. I turned around, and there was Mrs. Gentry, watching me with a knowing look. "You might want to pay attention to the stories," she whispered. I didn't know what she meant, but as I looked back at the darkness, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Was I in deeper than I ever intended? The stories haunted me. I was a guest at this Thanksgiving feast, but what was serving the meal? The question left me with a knot in my stomach. As Thanksgiving approached, the air was charged with a strange energy. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was lurking just outside my view, waiting to reveal itself. I spent the next day filled with anxiety. I avoided the town hall, too uneasy to face the stares I felt lingering on me. Instead, I chose to wander the outskirts of town, where the trees formed a thick boundary between the familiar and the unknown. I hoped that breathing in the fresh air would clear my head. The leaves crunched beneath my feet, but the quiet felt oppressive. I thought about Mrs. Gentry and her cryptic words. Why did the townsfolk seem so haunted? Halfway through my walk, I stumbled upon a clearing, and there, half buried in the leaves, was a small rusted metal object. I leaned down and unearthed it. It was a locket, tarnished but still intact. I opened it, expecting a picture or maybe a lock of hair. Instead, I found an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local family missing after Thanksgiving feast." I felt my pulse quicken. It was one of the stories I had heard before. A family vanished without a trace. I looked around the darkening woods. What if I was digging up things that should remain buried? I carefully tucked the locket into my pocket and headed back toward town. That night I decided to confront Mrs. Gentry again. When I arrived at her home, the light inside flickered like a candle, casting shadows that danced around the room. She was sitting by the window, looking out like she sensed I had something to say. I pulled the locket from my pocket, my hands trembling. "Do you know about this?" Her gaze hardened, and she took the locket from me, examining it closely. "It belonged to them," she whispered. "They were the last to disappear before the stories changed. They didn't just vanish. They were taken." My stomach dropped. Taken? By what? The woods, dear. Something in those woods demands a price. They just gave in. She placed the locket back in my hands. You shouldn't be digging into things you don't understand. Not now. Her words sank in and I felt increasingly isolated. What do you mean, not now? A loud thump echoed outside. My heart raced and I leaped to my feet. What was that? I asked, voice shaking. Mrs. Gentry shot up, eyes wide. Stay in here, she yelled. I turned to bolt for the door, but the light flickered off completely, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, but it wouldn't turn on. Everything felt heavy and thick. The sound came again, this time closer. I could hear something moving, scratching against the walls. Then from outside, a low whisper curled around us, wrapping me in a cold grip. Come out and play. I felt the floor beneath me shift as if it were alive. I knew then I had to leave. Whatever was out there wanted in. I was no longer a mere observer. I was part of the story now. I just didn't know how it would end. I barely had a moment to catch my breath before I heard a crash from the back of the house. The sound came from the kitchen, distant but potent, like a signal of chaos. With no chance to think, instinct kicked in. I had to get out. I didn't wait for Mrs. Gentry. I sprinted to the door, fumbling the handle in my urgency. The latch clicked open just as I heard the whisper again, this time more insistent, wrapping around me like icy fingers. Come out and play. I forced myself through the door, stepping onto the porch. The chill in the air struck me like a slap. I stared into the dark woods that loomed just beyond Mrs. Gentry's yard. The trees were still, but I felt the weight of something hidden, watching. I realized I couldn't leave the locket behind. I turned and snatched it from the table by the door, holding it tightly in my fist. Just as I tucked it away, a figure moved in the shadows of the yard. I squinted, heart racing. It was a child, standing still and silent, their face pale and expressionless. Help me, the child said in a voice that sounded both familiar and foreign. I hesitated. I wanted to trust that voice, but something deep in my gut told me not to. This was beyond anything I had known. I turned to run down the steps, but then the porch creaked ominously and the figure stepped closer. I could see the child's eyes now, big and dark, lacking any warmth. You have to play, they whispered again, the words curling like smoke in the cold night air. Without waiting for a response, I bolted off the porch, my feet pounding on the ground as I fled into the dark. The night wrapped around me, and I didn't dare look back. I could still hear the soft whispers chasing me, blending into the wind. I ran toward the tree line, breathing hard, desperate to put distance between myself and whatever twisted game was unfolding behind me. My mind raced with thoughts of the family in the clipping. Who were they? Had they met the child? Were they still out there, lost in the same trap? Suddenly the woods came alive. The rustling leaves turned into whispers and shadows moved within the trees. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root, sending me sprawling. As I lay on the ground, the air shifted, thickening around me as if the darkness was breathing. That's when I saw it, a glimmering light deep in the woods, similar to a beacon. My instincts screamed for me to run in the opposite direction, but the light was all-consuming, pulling me in like a moth to a flame. I hesitated, torn between the desire to escape and the strange call of the light. Then, to my terror, I heard it again, the child's voice louder now, echoing from all around me. You can't leave. You belong with us. I pushed myself up, adrenaline surging. I had to decide quickly. Did I move toward the light or retreat back into the shadows? As the whispers resumed, urging me closer, I realized I had to confront whatever was waiting for me. I took a shaky breath and stepped forward. The light beckoned me, its enchanting glow slicing through the darkness like a knife. I felt a pull, an undeniable force guiding my steps. My feet carried me deeper into the woods, ignoring every instinct that shouted for me to turn back. Each stride felt heavy, as if the ground itself conspired to slow me down. As I approached the luminous spot, I noticed it pulse gently, like a heartbeat. It illuminated the trees around it, casting eerie shadows that danced in the corners of my vision. The whispers intensified, merging into a low hum that seemed to vibrate in my bones. "Come play," they called, seductive and taunting. Suddenly the light flickered and I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced around. I expected the child's pale face to reappear, but instead, I found nothing but the swirling mist of darkness surrounding me. I felt isolated, the world fading into a silence that amplified my anxiety. Then out of nowhere, the child's voice pierced the quiet again, but this time it wasn't alone. Now other voices layered over it, whispering secrets, begging for attention. "We're waiting," they echoed, deepening the unease in my gut. I searched for the source, stepping closer to the light, confused by the mix of dread and curiosity. As I neared, I could see shapes, a gathering of figures in the flickering glow. Each was silhouetted against the light, but I could make out more children, their forms indistinguishable. They were all staring at me, their eyes wide and dark. The pale child stood at the front, a ghastly grin stretching across their face. "Join us," they said, the command rehearsed and chilling. "It's time to play." I stumbled back, every hair on my body standing on end. The realization hit me hard. These weren't just lost children. They felt like echoes of something far more sinister, shadows trapped in this liminal space. I thought of the family in the news clipping again. Had they fallen victim to this dreadful game? Was I next? With that thought, I bolted. I turned and ran, fear surging through my veins. The whispers chased after me, blending into an unholy symphony of laughter and cries. Trees blurred past me, their branches clawing at my arms as I fought to break free from the dark enchantment. Just as I reached the edge of the woods, I heard a piercing shriek. The child's voice transformed into something raw and angry. "You can't escape. You're part of the game now." I burst through the tree line, gasping for air. I glanced back. The trees stood still, the light faded into the shadows. But I knew it was still there, waiting. I stumbled forward, desperate to create distance between me and whatever I had encountered. But the locket I held felt heavier in my pocket, a weight of history and warning. That's when I stopped, a chill rippling down my spine. Something had shifted. I wasn't alone. I could feel a presence behind me, a new weight in the darkness that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath and prepared to turn around, heart racing. Would I face what I had disturbed, or had the game only just begun? I turned slowly, the air thick with an unsettling tension. My senses buzzed, every hair prickling as if charged with static electricity. I strained my eyes against the shadow, hoping it was just my imagination. But there it was, a figure emerging from the darkness. A tall silhouette stepped into the dim light of the fading moon. It was a child, much like the others I had seen earlier, but there was something distinctly different about this one. Their skin seemed almost transparent, and they bore an expression of unsettling calm. Instead of fear, they exuded a haunting tranquility that twisted my stomach. "Why did you run?" the child asked, tilting their head slightly. "We only wanted to play." I felt my breath hitch in my throat. "What do you want from me?" I stammered, backing away instinctively. I could hear the whispers behind me, echoes of those unseen children. "We want you to join us. Don't you want to be part of our game?" The voice held an almost sing-song quality, laced with something sinister. "No, I don't want to play," I shouted, desperation spilling over the moment I finished the sentence. The figure remained unmoved, their dark eyes boring into mine, searching. "But you're already part of it. You stepped into our world." A cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the faint laughter of children. Panic surged through me. I turned once more to flee, but before I could take a step, a sudden weight pressed down on my chest. It felt like an invisible hand was anchoring me to the spot. "Stay," the child commanded, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. This time the voice wasn't pleading, it was an order. I struggled against the pressure, but I was rooted in place, terror clawing at my mind. "Let me go," I pleaded, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. "Only if you promise to play," the child replied. "Only if you promise to be one of us." I searched my surroundings, desperate for an escape. Even the trees loomed closer, their leafy arms a reminder of how isolated I was. My thoughts raced back to the family from the news article. What had happened to them? Did they face this same choice? "Don't you want to find out what happens next?" the child whispered, and I felt a compulsion to stay and listen, to step deeper into this nightmarish game. No, I refused to give in. Somehow I managed to break the hold they had on me. I turned and sprinted away as fast as I could, the whispers and laughter swirling around me like a storm. I dodged past branches, heart pounding, determined to get to the safety of the road ahead. Just as I thought I might escape, I tripped over something solid hidden beneath the leaves. I fell hard, scraping my hands against the rough earth. When I looked up, I froze. There, illuminated by a faint glow, lay an old, cracked mirror half buried in the ground. I reached out to touch it, a strange pull drawing me in. That's when I saw it. My reflection was not alone. Behind me, shadows began to ripple and rise up within the glass. Someone, or something, was staring back at me from the other side. The hushed voices grew louder, insistent. "Join us," they echoed again, finally revealing a long-forgotten truth, but clarity only deepened the dread coursing through my veins. I pulled my hand back, heart racing, as I let the mirror drop. It fell to the ground with a dull thud, and I scrambled to my feet. My mind was reeling. The dark figures behind the glass had felt so alive, so real. I could still hear their whispers, echoing through my mind, drawing me back as if they were threads pulling me into a web. I needed to get away, to find help. Maybe my phone would still work. I turned and tore through the underbrush, branches slapping at my arms. My breath came in ragged gasps. The cold air burned my lungs. And behind me, I could feel their presence. Those children ever closer, their laughter mingling with the rustle of the leaves. I burst into a clearing, the moonlight cascading down like a spotlight. It was eerily quiet here. No laughter, no whispers. The silence felt suffocating. I hesitated, scanning the perimeter for any signs of those shadowy figures. My eyes caught a glimmer in the distance, and I rushed toward it. As I approached, I realized it was an old, run-down cabin. The wooden walls were tarnished by age, and ivy crept up its sides. This was it. Maybe I could find a way to contact someone or to hide. I reached the door and pushed it open. It creaked loudly, protesting against the intrusion. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of neglect. I stepped in cautiously, holding my breath, half expecting the children to rush in behind me. There was a small table in the center, papers strewn across it. I leaned in closer, squinting at the faded words. It looked like someone had been documenting the disappearances, a list of names and dates from years past. Panic swelled in my chest as I scanned the names. Each listed person matched the faces of the children I had seen, children who had vanished without a trace. Suddenly a sharp noise echoed from behind me, like a soft giggle. I whirled around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded as I pressed my back against the wall, trying to calm my racing mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. "Don't you want to play?" a voice whispered, too close for comfort. I spun, looking for the source, and my eyes landed on a dusty mirror hanging crookedly on the wall. The reflection showed not just the cabin, but something beyond, a playground filled with swings creaking in the wind, shadows dancing along the ground. The child's voice echoed again, a haunting reminder of what they wanted. "Join us. We can have so much fun." My mind raced with thoughts. Was this how others had been lured? I clenched my fists, the sheer terror of the situation making me feel weak. How had I stepped into this nightmare? I needed to leave, but the whispers grew louder, slithering into my thoughts like vines. Just then the front door slammed shut. I gasped, spun around, and for a moment, I saw a fleeting figure through the murk, one of the children, their eyes shimmering like dark stars. "Stay with us." It called one last time before fading away. The other children emerged from the shadows of the living room, their faces twisted into smiles that felt both inviting and dangerous. And as I backed away, searching desperately for escape, I realized the window behind me had vanished. I was trapped. I pressed my trembling hands against the wall, my mind racing. The children were no longer just whispers. They were real. I could see their silhouettes moving in the corners of my eyes, darting like fish in water. They were watching me. I needed to act fast. I scanned the room for something, anything that could help me. The table was cluttered with old books and dusty toys. A small, grimy door at the far corner caught my eye. It looked like it could lead to a cellar or maybe an escape route. I decided to take my chances. As I moved toward the door, the children giggled again, their laughter echoing off the walls. Words floated in the air, teasing and coaxing. "Come play with us," they sang. I felt a cold rush run down my spine. I would not let myself be lured by their promises. The door creaked as I pulled it open. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the cabin's main room. The children's faces peered from the darkness, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. My heart raced, but I forced myself to step into the dark space beyond. The air was damp and musty. It smelled of mold and decay. I fumbled for the light switch, but the bulb flickered and sputtered before finally dying. I was plunged into darkness, my hands shaking as I felt my way down a narrow staircase. Each step creaked under my weight, and the children's voices faded into a low murmur, blendings of laughter and calls that echoed outside. I hoped I was moving away from them, but fear twisted in my stomach. What if I was heading right into their trap? At the bottom of the stairs, I stumbled into a small room. A single window provided the faintest hint of light, illuminating the dust particles that floated around. My breath caught in my throat as I realized I wasn't alone. In the far corner, a figure sat hunched over, shrouded in shadows. I could only see its silhouette, but even in the dim light, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "Help me," it croaked, a voice raspy and broken. I cautiously approached, curiosity battling my fear. The figure slowly turned toward me and my heart dropped. The face looked familiar, one of the children from the mirror. But this version was not the playful spirit I had seen. This child looked hollow, their eyes sunken and dark. "Don't listen to them," the figure whispered fiercely, fear evident in its voice. "They'll take you like they took me." I backed away, panic surging through me. "What do you mean? Who are they?" I asked, desperation causing my voice to tremble. But before the child could respond, the whispers crescendoed into a chaotic torrent. It felt like the air around us thickened, constricting like a snake coiling tighter. The room trembled as I stumbled back, trying to escape the suffocating voices. Then, without warning, the walls began to pulse, and I saw shadows moving among the darkness, shifting closer. The child had vanished, leaving only an echo of that haunting whisper. Suddenly, the faint light flickered back on, and I froze. A figure stood behind me, and I could tell from the familiar outline it was one of them, one of the children. They began to laugh, a sound that twisted my insides. "You can't escape. You're part of our game now." As I turned to flee, the world around me warped and everything went dark. I gasped as the darkness enveloped me, my arms flailing instinctively. I felt disoriented, the floor slipping away as if I were falling through a void. But then, just as suddenly, light flooded back in. I blinked, trying to comprehend my situation. The cellar was now filled with an unsettling brightness. The walls were no longer alive with shadows. They stood unnervingly still. But the figures were gone. I was alone. Or so I thought. Trembling, I made my way back to the stairs, my breath quickening. I felt an overwhelming urge to escape this space. As I climbed, I heard that laughter again, echoing from above. The sound seemed to seep through the walls, wrapping around me like a cold blanket. I hesitated, caught in the grip of dread. As I emerged back into the main room, my heart sank. The furniture had moved. The old table was turned over, toys scattered like fallen leaves. It felt unnatural. I stood frozen, scanning for any sign of the children. From behind me there was a soft whisper like the rustle of leaves. "Play with us." My breath caught in my throat as I turned slowly. At first I saw nothing, only the chaos of the cabin. But then, just for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse. Silhouettes darted again from corner to corner. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. What had happened while I was in the cellar? I needed to get out. I stepped toward the door, but the laughter grew louder, swirling around me until it felt suffocating. Then I noticed something glistening on the floor, a small silver pendant that caught the faint light. I knelt down to pick it up, and as I held it in my palm, I recognized it from the child's neck in the mirror. Suddenly, the memories rushed back. The child I had seen below had worn this pendant. What does it mean? I murmured aloud, my voice trembling. The laughter stopped. An oppressive silence filled the room, thick and heavy. My grip on the pendant tightened as a sense of urgency washed over me. I need to find a way out, I whispered to myself. Just then, from the corner of my eye, a shadow moved. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there, just an empty doorway leading outside. I took a hesitant step toward it, heart racing, but the door slammed shut before I could reach it. Panic surged through me. This was no longer just a game, it felt like a warning. The children, they weren't just playing. They were trapped like me, and they didn't want anyone to escape. That's when I saw it. A flash of movement in the darkness beyond the door. A figure silhouetted against the faint light, blocking my escape. It was taller, the outline unmistakably twisted, as if the laughter itself had taken form. My heart raced as I prepared to run again. I only hoped that I wouldn't be caught in their game for much longer. I froze, my mind racing as the figure blocked the doorway. The outline was not just tall, it loomed, shifting in a way that made it seem almost alive. I felt a primal instinct to flee, but my legs wouldn't obey. The laughter echoed in my ears like a sinister melody, pulling me into its rhythm. "Let me out," I shouted, my voice trembling. But my plea only seemed to amuse the figure, its form flickering in and out of clarity. It raised a long, dark hand, motioning for me to come closer. I shook my head violently, desperation clawing at me. In that instant, the pendant in my grasp grew warmer, almost buzzing against my skin. It felt as though it was alive, and in that strange moment, I understood. I couldn't just escape. I had to confront whatever was happening here. Perhaps the pendant held the key to both the children and the entity before me. Gathering my courage, I took a shaky step forward, extending the pendant toward the shadow. "I know you're connected to them. What do you want?" The laughter, once bright and cheerful, was now low and menacing, wrapping around me like a predator closing in. The figure shifted, stepping into the light just enough for me to see its features. Its face was distorted, a grotesque blend of childhood innocence mixed with something darker. "We want to play." The voice came out as a soft hiss, and I felt the walls close in impossibly tighter. "Please, I can't stay, I need to leave." My pleas seemed to falter against its chilling presence. The laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Then, without warning, the figure lunged forward. Fear shot through me and instinct kicked in. I turned and sprinted toward the back of the cabin, the sound of its footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't know where I would go. I only knew I had to put distance between us. I stumbled into another room, nearly tripping over a tattered rug. The decor was unfamiliar, dark wood paneling and dusty portraits that seemed to watch me. I could hear the laughter again, now distant but still lurking, as if it were taunting me from afar. Searching frantically, I spotted a window. I dashed toward it and pulled at the latch, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged, and I pounded against the glass. "Let me out!" As I screamed, the pendant pulsed in my hand, sending a jolt of energy through me. I glanced back at the door just in time to see the figure burst through. It had eyes now, two glowing orbs that bored into me with an intense hunger. Suddenly, a memory came rushing back, of the night I'd first heard about the house, the whispers of lost children, the game that could never end. I realized with a sinking dread that the pendant wasn't just a connection, it was a part of their game. Just as I was about to lose hope, the window I had struggled with began to shimmer. A faint light seeped through the cracks, illuminating a path. The figure hesitated, its twisted form wavering back as if repelled by the light. "What do I do?" I shouted to no one but myself as I moved closer to the glowing escape. My next move could be my last. With the blinding light pulsing through the space, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. The figure before me hesitated, its glowing eyes flickering, as if threatened by the very light emanating from the window. I dared to hope. Could this be my way out? The whispers surged again, a frantic roar of laughter and pleas that echoed off the walls, drowning out reason. But I couldn't focus on them. Instead, focusing on the warmth of the pendant in my hand gave me clarity. I took a bold step toward the shimmering window, hoping with every ounce of my being that it wouldn't vanish as the laughter swarmed me. "Let me through!" I shouted defiantly, striking the glass with desperation. The light expanded, pushing against the dark corners of the room, illuminating the shadows dancing just beyond the window, taunting with their gone but not forgotten presence. The figure snarled. "You can't leave," it hissed, shifting closer, hands reaching out toward me. But as I pressed against the glass, I felt a strange sensation build within me, a surge of energy flowing from the pendant. The warmth spread up my arm, igniting a fire in my heart. Perhaps this pendant was my weapon, not just an anchor to their torment. With renewed determination, I pressed my palm to the glass. The light enveloped me, radiating a warmth that pushed back against the figure lurking at the door. In that moment, I made my choice. I was not a part of their game. I was bigger than it, stronger. I took a deep, steadying breath and let the light consume me, ready to leap through. As I felt the energy erupt, the whispers morphed into a cacophony of shouts and cries, a swirling storm of confusion that clawed at my mind. "Don't leave us," they pleaded, a pathetic symphony that tried to tether me to their past. I could feel their desperation, their pain, a cold reminder that once they were children just like me. But I was tired of being haunted. In one decisive movement, I flung myself through the window. The moment my body crossed its threshold, I felt a jolt, as though I were being pulled through two worlds at once. The warmth of the light enveloped me, embracing me, and then, everything went still. I landed on solid ground, breathless and gasping. I blinked against the sudden brightness of the world outside, the air crisp and cold. The familiar outline of the old cabin stood behind me, but the sinister shadows were gone, the whispers silenced. I was alone in the moonlit clearing, the chill night air crisp against my skin. But I wasn't free. The pendant still hung heavy in my pocket, a reminder of what I had encountered and escaped. As I turned to leave the woods behind, a creeping unease settled in my chest. What had I truly escaped? Those children? Were they still trapped within those walls? I felt something shift within me as I walked away, a lingering uncertainty. I was alive. I had escaped the game, yet their voices haunted me still. Had they really wanted to play, or was it something darker? I reached the edge of the woods where the gravel road stretched before me, unwinding as far as I could see. The town slept peacefully, unaware of what lay hidden beneath the surface of its charm. I thought of Mrs. Gentry and her knowing gaze. I wondered if she would feel my absence, if she could sense the darkness that lingered just beyond our lives, waiting, watching, lurking. And even as I took my first steps away, I couldn't shake the uncertainty of what I had experienced or how deeply it would imprint on my soul. As I glanced back at the woods one last time, I felt a chill in the air, a whisper on the wind that wrapped around me, soft yet insistent. And deep down, I knew I might never truly be free of their call. I moved to a new city the day after, attempting to leave the haunting echoes of my experience behind. But I still think about those children sometimes, their laughs filled with both joy and dread. Were they still waiting to play? Would the locket ever truly let go of its secrets? Questions lingered as I tried to find normalcy, uncertain if the grip of that night would ever really fade.